Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. I hope you're having a good day today. So, I've decided to go ahead and start recording again. I stopped because I had just been so busy and, with my new job and just everything going on, there's just a lot. And so I kind of let it slide. And then, of course, having to self censor on YouTube and not being able to talk about certain things really bothered me. But then I had decided to maybe focus a little more on sharing on Rumble. I will still share on YouTube, but I'm going to focus more on getting out there about Rumble. So if you're going to watch the podcast, it would be better to go to Rumble because it would not surprise me if more of my videos get deleted or if I get banned again, because that always happens. I did notice that my latest podcast that I did when I discussed the documentary died suddenly, and I put that up on Rumble. That was 15 weeks ago, and it had 14 views. And so I decided to go and promote it and share it on some Facebook groups and things like that. And overnight, within I would say 8 hours maybe, it had shot up to 50 something or 60 something views. It's now at almost 80. So I feel like Rumble is the place to go now. So that's where I'll be going. I'm also doing this live on YouTube. I don't know how it works because I don't really do live YouTube very much. And I don't know if you can see my screen. That's my big concern. I know I don't have a camera, but can you see the screen I'm looking at? I don't know. So today I didn't know what to talk about coming on the first one back, but I've been watching a lot of videos on YouTube lately, um, religious videos. There's so many, about the end times and, are we living in the end times? And some of them are accurate, some of them are way, way out there and wrong, and they misinterpret the Bible. Do they do it on purpose or are they just ignorant? That I don't know. Um, I did watch this one yesterday, and the man was talking about how King Charles is the Antichrist. So King Charles is supposedly the Antichrist, and he puts down all the evidence as to why that's true. And he even puts down the evidence as to why there's not a pre-tribulation rapture, or at least in his opinion that there's not. I will tell you right up front, I do believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. Um, if I didn't, I would feel like you would have no hope, because why would you look forward to Jesus coming back if he had to live through 7 years of horrible times and death and destruction and oppression? Why? How could you be excited about that? I know that eternal life in heaven comes, yes, but to go through all that too. But it clearly does talk in the Bible and gives us a clear indication of a pre-tribulation rapture. And if you read in Revelation, now if you're not a Christian, you're not going to understand Revelation. And even if you are, you still are probably not going to understand most of it. I don't. A lot of the stuff I learned is through a pastor that preaches on Revelation and helps you understand what that part of the Bible is about. It's prophetic. But a lot of it, if I read it just by myself, I would have never understood it. So I had to get help. But one of the things that was pointed out by this pastor is one of the ways that there is a pre tribulation rapture is that the first three chapters in Revelation talk about the church, and the church would be born again Christians. But after that, starting in chapter 4, verse 1, the church is never mentioned again throughout all the rest of Revelation when it's telling you about the seven vials and the four horsemen and, the Antichrist and the false prophet and becoming a one world government and religion and economy. We're never mentioned again. And that's because we're not there. So, with that being said, I wanted to take a look at the fall of Christianity in America today. And why is it happening? Why does it matter to the American culture? Most assuredly, it matters because America was founded on Christian values and morals. But there's other reasons why it matters. And then also, why are the church backing down from preaching the gospel and truth? And why are they falling in line with the leftist agenda and accepting the trans movement and everything like that. I've seen videos all over the place of quote unquote pastors, that term is used very loosely, affirming transgenderism, and it, some very huge blasphemy comes from those videos about God being trans, and he's neither, he's woman and he's man, he's gay and he's straight. And I'm just, sometimes I'm so shocked that those people aren't struck down dead where they stand, truly. Okay. So I went and looked for some articles, and, if there's stuff in here that I disagree with, I'll point out what it is and why I disagree with it, because not everybody is going to have the same opinion that I have. But I thought maybe people who, do the research and talk to people and the polls and different things like that, see what they have to say about why people are, falling away from the faith, which, that is one of the signs of the end times, is that there will be a great falling away. People's love will wax cold. People will be easily offended by things, hateful. Good will be evil, and evil will be good. Now, I'm not quoting scripture, I'm paraphrasing. So you see a lot of that taking place, and it's worse than it has ever been before. So this one is from The Guardian, and I like The Guardian sometimes. It just depends on what I'm reading about. I don't know Adam, right here in front of my face. Adam Gabat, I guess is how you say that name, losing their religion while U.S. churches are on the decline. As the U.S. adjusts to an increasingly non-religious population, thousands of churches are closing each year, probably accelerated by COVID. Now, this is back in January of this year, so it's a little old, but it's still relevant. So, churches are closing at rapid numbers in the U.S., researchers say, as congregations dwindle across the country and a younger generation of Americans abandon Christianity altogether, even as faith continues to dominate American politics. I should have brought this up. I should have brought up a graph. Well, if I could type. Let's see if I can find a read. Well, this is 2020. So let's see what it shows us. Okay. So this is from 2020, the religious landscape in 2020. 7 in 10 Americans, or 70%, identify as Christian, including more than 4 in 10 who identify as white Christian, and why that matters, and more than 1/4 who identify as Christian of color. Nearly 1 in 4 Americans, or 23%, are religiously unaffiliated, and 5% identify with non-Christian religions. So white evangelical Protestant is going to be this one here. And then, so this is going to be well, first of all, these are not all Christian. Okay. Christian is not a religion. And I think a lot of people get that wrong. Christianity is not a religion. Christian means Christ-like. So it's a relationship. So if you're not saved and born again, you're not a Christian, no matter what denomination you follow. And you can definitely see, that the Muslim and Buddhist and all that. So all these people here that claim that they are Christian, that doesn't necessarily mean they're culturally Christian. They say they're Christian because they believe in God, or they believe that Jesus died on the cross and was resurrected, but they're not born again. So they just identify as Christian. So that number is actually going to be much, much smaller for sure. So we'll come back to this in a minute. As the U.S. adjusts to an increasingly non-religious population, thousands of churches are closing each year in the country, a figure that experts believe may have accelerated since the COVID-19 pandemic. The situation means some hard decisions for pastors who have to decide when a dwindling congregation is no longer sustainable. But it has also created a boom market for those wanting to buy churches, with former houses of worship now finding new life. About 4,500 Protestant churches closed in 2019. The last year data is available, with about 3,000 new churches opening, according to Lifeway Research. It was the first time the number of churches in the U.S. hadn't grown since the evangelical firms started studying the topic. I'm assuming that means Lifeway Research started. When the pandemic speeding up with the pandemic speeding up a broader trend of Americans turning away from Christianity, researchers say the closures will only have accelerated. Quote, the closures, even for a temporary period of time, impacted a lot of churches. People breaking that habit of attending church means a lot of churches had to work hard to get people back to attending. In the last 3 years, all signs are pointing to a continued pace of closures, probably similar to 2019 or possibly higher, as there's been a really rapid rise in American individuals who say they're not religious. And that's Scott McConnell, the executive director of Lifeway Research. Protestant pastors reported that typical church attendance is only 85% of pre-pandemic levels. McConnell said, while research by the Survey Center on American Life and the University of Chicago found that in spring 2022, 67% of Americans reported attending church at least once a year, compared with 75% before the pandemic. But while COVID may have accelerated the decline, there is a broader, long-running trend of people moving away from religion. In 2017, Lifeway surveyed young adults aged between 18 and 22 who had attended church regularly for at least a year during high school. The firm found that 7 out of 10 had stopped attending church regularly. They said the younger generation just doesn't feel like they're being accepted in a church environment, or some of their choices aren't being accepted. So some of the reasons were logistical, as people moved away for college or started jobs, which made it difficult to attend church. But some of the other answers are not so much logistics. On the top answers was church members seem to be judgmental or hypocritical. And so the younger generation just doesn't feel like they're being accepted. So about a quarter of the young adults who dropped out of church said they disagreed with their church's stance on political and social issues. A study by Pew Research found that the number of Americans who identified as Christian was 64% in 2020. With 30% of U.S. population being classed as religiously unaffiliated. About 6% of Americans identified with Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism. So Pew wrote, since the 1990s, large numbers of Americans have left Christianity to join the growing ranks of U.S. adults who describe their religious identity as atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular. This accelerating trend is reshaping the U.S. religious landscape. So in 1972, 92% of Americans said they were Christian. But by 2070, that number will drop to below 50%. And number of quote unquote religiously unaffiliated Americans, or the nuns as they call them, will probably outnumber those adhering to Christianity. Stephen Bullivant, author of Nonverts, The Making of Ex-Christian America, and professor of theology and the sociology of religion at St. Mary's University, said the Christian world, it had been a generational change. While grandparents might have been regular churchgoers, their children would say they believe in God but not go to church regularly. By the time millennials came around, they had little experience or relationship with church-going or religion. In the Catholic Church in particular, the sexual abuse scandal may have driven away people who had only a tenuous connection to the faith. And then the other thing is the pandemic. It says here that Boulevard said most other countries saw a move away from religion earlier than the U.S., but the U.S. had particular circumstances that slowed things down. So Canada, Britain, France, Australia, New Zealand, the nuns rise much earlier, the wake of the 1960s, the baby boom generation, this kind of big growing separation of kind of traditional Christian morality. So what happens in America that I think dampens down the rise of the nuns is the Cold War. Because in America, unlike in Britain, there's a very explicit kind of Christian America versus godless communism framing, and to be non-religious is to be un-American. He says, I think that dampens it down until you get the millennial generation from whom the Cold War is just a vague memory from their early childhood. Yeah, I was just born when Reagan took office. So when people leave, congregations dwindle, and when that gets to a critical point, churches close. That has led to a flood of churches available for sale and a range of opportunities for the once holy buildings. Brian Dolahide, managing director of AD Advisors, a real estate company that specializes in church sales, said the last 10 years had seen a spike in sales. Frequently, churches become housing or care homes, while some of the churches are bought by other churches wanting to expand. But selling a church isn't like selling a house or a business. Frequently, the sellers want a buyer who plans to use the church for a good cause. Dolahide said he had recently sold a church in El Paso, which is now used as housing for recent immigrants, and a convent in Pittsburgh, which will be used as affordable housing. He says that the faith-based transaction is so different in so many ways from the for-profit transaction. We're not looking to profit from our transactions. We're looking for the best use that reflects the last 50 years or 100 years use if possible. The closures aren't spread evenly through the country. In Texas, John Muzica of Church Realty, a company that specializes in church sales, said there were fewer churches for sale than at any point in the last 15 years. He believes that is partly down to Texas's response to the pandemic, where the governor allowed churches to open in May 2020, even when the number of new COVID cases was extremely high. Mazuka said, I would say if a church stayed closed for more than a year, it was really hard to get those people to come back. When you were closed for 3 months, you were able to get over it. That aside, closures are often due to a failure of churches to adapt. A church will go through a life cycle. At some point, maybe the congregation ages out. Maybe they stop reaching young families. If the church ages and doesn't reach young people, or the demographics change and they don't figure out how to reach the new demographic, that church ends up closing. Yes, there's financial pressures that will close the church, but oftentimes it's more that they didn't figure out how to change when the community changed, or they didn't have enough young people to continue the congregation for the next generation. And that would be my thing, because I don't think that a church should change just because the demographic changes, because the gospel is for everybody and anybody. So the teaching and the preaching doesn't have to change to reach new people. When you start changing, then you start getting these charismatic churches and turning into non-denominational and loosely preaching the gospel, but mostly, as they say, tickling their ears, make them feel good. Joel Osteen, prosperity gospel, you know, Kenneth Copeland also is prosperity gospel, but he's a creepy man. Anyway, but being able to get the young people into the church to continue after the older generation dies out, that, yeah, I could see that being a reason for churches to close, especially if you are a Bible believing, you believe you must be born again and live a moral life and are supposed to go to church. A lot of people say, well, I don't have to go to church to be a Christian. Well, you do, because the Bible says you do. That doesn't mean that, I'll be the first to say I'm not perfect. I've missed church. Doesn't mean I'm right for doing it. But the thing is that, you are supposed to be there. And the younger people, especially after they did close the churches down in the pandemic and they could watch church online, they liked that. They didn't like having to go. And so I could see why that would close the church out. So there's that. Now let's go back here to this graph really quickly and see what it's saying. The most substantial cultural and political divides are between white Christians and Christians of color. More than 4 in 10 Americans, 44%, identify as white Christian, including white evangelical Protestants, 14%. The white mainline, non-evangelical Protestants, 16%, and white Catholics, 12%, as well as small percentages who identify as Latter-day Saint or Mormon, Jehovah's Witness, and Orthodox Christian. Christians of color include Hispanic Catholics, 8%, Black Protestants, 7%, Hispanic Protestants, 4%, other Protestants of color, 4%, and other Catholics of color, 2%. The rest of religiously affiliated Americans belong to non-Christian groups, including 1% who are Jewish, 1% Muslim, 1% Buddhist, 0.5% Hindu, and 1% who identify with other religions. Religiously unaffiliated Americans comprise those who do not claim any particular religious affiliation, or 17%, and those who identify as atheist, 3%, or agnostic, 3%. The decline of white Christian America slows. So, over the last few decades, the proportion of the U.S. population that is white Christian has declined by nearly 1/3. As recently as 1996, almost 2/3 of Americans, or 65%, identified as white and Christian. By 2006, that had declined to 54%, and by 2017, it was down to 43%. The proportion of white Christians hit a low point in 2018 at 42% and rebounded slightly in 2019 and 2020 to 44%. And I would think that that was because a lot of people saw everything going on with the lockdowns and oppression from the government and the mandates and things like that. And, it kind of resurged them, wanting to show that they had faith that they would be taken care of and they didn't have to worry about it. And if they got sick, they got sick, but everything was in God's control. I think, because I don't know where the study is, but there was a study that showed that during the pandemic years that people who identified as being Christian, and I'm going to include people culturally because I think there's some in there that they maybe really do think that they're Christian, even though they don't realize that they aren't yet, that they fared, conservatives especially on the political spectrum, fared far better during the pandemic years than people who were non-religious or agnostic or atheist. Why did they thrive better? Well, because we have hope. And people that don't believe in God just don't have any hope. Okay. So that tick upward indicates the decline is slowing from its pace of losing roughly 11% per decade. Now, the rise of the nuns slows as well. Disaffiliating white Christians have fueled the growth of the religiously unaffiliated during this period. Only 16% of Americans reported being religiously unaffiliated in 2007. This proportion rose to 19% by 2012 and then gained roughly a percentage point each year from 2012 to 2017. Reflecting the patterns above, the proportion of religiously unaffiliated Americans hit a high point of 26% in 2018, but has since slightly declined to 23% in 2020. The increase in proportion of religiously unaffiliated Americans has occurred across all age groups, but has been most pronounced among young Americans. In 1986, only 10% of those ages 18 to 29 identified as religiously unaffiliated. In 2016, that number had increased to 38% and declined slightly in 2020 to 36%. Let's see. So, a generational C in religious affiliation. So if we look here in ages 18 to 29, 36% are unaffiliated. That's a huge portion. Ages 30 to 49, it's only 25%. Ages 50 to 64, 18%, and 65 up, 14%. And you see that the number gets bigger for being Christian, evangelical rather, as you go up in age. Let's see here. This is the median age of religious groups. So white evangelical Protestant, average age of they're about 56 years old. And if you get to unaffiliated, the average age is about 38. So you're looking at millennials in that era. Educational attainment by religious affiliation. So if you look, okay, the top one is Hispanic Catholic. So high school or less, 65% of Hispanic Catholics have a high school degree or less than that. And then if you look at white evangelical Protestant, you have 40%, where some 30% have some college, 19% have a graduate degree, and 10% went postgraduate. Now, Hindu, it's a huge difference, and I think that's cultural related, not just religiously related. This graph is religious affiliation by race and ethnicity. So evangelical Protestant. This is the Black and non-Hispanic. But if you look at white non-Hispanic, it's 23%. So more Black people identify as evangelical Protestant. And then if you look here, Catholic, 50% of Hispanics identify as Catholic. And I mean, that's usually about how it looks when you look at races and religion. Republicans versus Democrats, white Christians and religious diversity. Both major political parties are majority Christian, with 80% of Republicans and 69% of Democrats identifying as Christian. Now, if we take that as true born-again Christians, those numbers are going to be cut significantly. And I would say that you wouldn't even have double-digit percentage of Democrats being true born-again Christians, if any, because how could you be a Democrat if you were? And you might be in the teens, low 20% of Republicans actually being born-again Christians. But this is just culturally identifying as Christian, whether you're Catholic or you're non-denominational, anything like that. So it is really hard for us to know who true Christians are because we don't ask the question like that. So, the biggest difference in the religious makeup of self identified Republicans and Democrats is the proportion of white Christians compared to Christians of color and the religiously unaffiliated. Two-thirds of Republicans, or 68%, identify as white and Christian, compared to 39% of Democrats. Among Republicans, 29% are white evangelical Protestants, 22% white mainline Protestants, and 15% are white Catholics. Among Democrats, those numbers fall to 9%, 16%, and 13%, respectively. By contrast, 13% of Democrats are Black Protestants, 10% are Hispanic Catholics, and 4% are Hispanic Protestants, compared to only 2%, 3%, and 3%, respectively, among Republicans. Nearly 1 in 4 Democrats, or 23%, are religiously unaffiliated, compared to 13% of Republicans. The religious makeup of Democrats generally resembles that of younger Americans ages 18 to 29, who are 20% white Christian, 26% Christian of color, 7% another religion, and 36% unaffiliated, and ages 30 to 49, who are 40% white Christian, 32% Christian of color, 4% another religion, and 23% unaffiliated. The Republican breakdown is more akin to groups of Americans over age 65 who are 59% white Christian, 20% Christian of color, 4% another religion, and 14% unaffiliated. Notably, no age group is as white and Christian as Republicans. Well, of course not. Shift in religious affiliation 2006 to 2020 by party affiliation. So, white evangelical Protestant, 37% Republican in 2006, and only 29% Republican in 2020. And then you also see the decline on the Democrats as well. But in 2006, Republicans only 4% were unaffiliated, 9% Democrat. But in 2020, now 13% are unaffiliated and 23% of Democrats are unaffiliated. And you can see that the Jewish identifying as Jewish didn't change too much. More Democrats identify as Jewish than Republicans. So, but it's really the identifying as a Christian and then being unaffiliated now. So PRRI has been collecting and aggregating data on religious diversity in America continuously since 2013. The combined dataset contains interviews with 459,822 Americans across all 50 states from 2013 to 2019. This dataset was merged with American Community Survey data on 3,142 counties across all 50 states to produce, for the first time, a rigorous estimate of the religious demographics of every county in the U.S. Because there's no measure of religious affiliation on the ACS or any other U.S. Census Bureau product, this PRRI Census of American Religion is the most comprehensive resource available on religious diversity in America. To measure religious diversity in the United States, the report uses an index developed to measure variations in the concentration of global religious populations. The index is calculated so that a score of 1 signifies complete diversity, every religious group is of equal size, and a score of 0 indicates a complete lack of diversity, and one religious group comprises the entire population of a given county. Okay, so the average religious diversity score by county in the U.S. is 0.625. Religious diversity is highest in urban areas. The 10 highest religious diversity scores are, you have Kings County, New York, Queens County, New York, Montgomery County, Maryland, Navajo County, Arizona, Santa Clara County, California, Middlesex County in New Jersey, Rockland County, New York, New York County, New York, Maui County, Hawaii, and Howard County, Maryland. Religious diversity is the lowest in the southern part of the U.S. and in rural areas. The lowest diversity scores among counties with more than 10,000 residents are, Noxubee County, Mississippi, Panola County, Mississippi, Connect County, Alabama, Amite County, Mississippi, Marion County, Mississippi, Perry County, Mississippi, Ashley County, Arkansas, Greene County, Mississippi, Smith County, Mississippi, and Clark County, Mississippi. Well, Mississippi falls right into the Bible Belt, so concentration of major religious groups in the U.S. So white Christians make up 44% of the U.S. population, it looks like. So let's see. The 10 highest concentrations of white Christians. So we have Lyon County, Iowa, Meeker County, Minnesota, Redwood County, Minnesota, Mercer County, Ohio, Madison County, Idaho, Campbell County, Tennessee, Osage County, Missouri, Somerset County, Pennsylvania, Wayne County, Tennessee, and Wilkes County, North Carolina. And then, so it just keeps breaking everything down by county. And so far, I have not seen Tarrant County listed on any of these. So I feel like Tarrant County is kind of diverse, and that's why we're not being listed. Yes, you're Mormons, Utah, pretty much only. And then, yeah, Mississippi and all that for your Black Protestant for sure. And then I can see why this is your Hispanic Protestants, Hispanic Catholic, same area, and then other Christian. So if you want, I'll link this in the description so you can go look at this stuff, these graphs yourself if you would like. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of just scroll through and just see what we have here. Now, this is your religiously unaffiliated by county, 23%. So, anyway, there you go. You can come check this out. It's fine. All right, now let's see. I talked about how Christianity plays a part in American culture, and it should, and even in American politics. This article here from Divided We Fall, it is written by Melissa Deckman. She's the CEO of Public Religion Research Institute. America's religious faith and tolerance are entwined in its political future. So, what is the future of Christianity in American politics? It is hard to escape news stories about the expanded role that some Christians are playing in American politics today, particularly within the Republican Party. What is sparking this growing influence of conservative Christianity within the GOP? And does this development signal that Christianity is likely to play a bigger role in the future of American politics? The involvement of conservative white Christians in modern politics is not a new phenomenon. As a reaction to social movements in the 60s and 70s, which sought greater rights for women, racial minorities, and gays and lesbians, the Christian right began organizing more systematically as a Republican Party faction, beginning with Ronald Reagan's presidency. At the time, the GOP welcomed such voters as part of its larger Southern strategy to appeal to white voters. However, to Reagan and other Republican leaders in Washington, there was a limit to this collaboration. They offered only lip service to many of the social concerns that led conservative white Christians to become more politically active. Establishment Republicans prioritized tax cuts, foreign policy, and national security over social issues for decades. Absolutely. And they're still doing it. They are still prioritizing that over the main cultural issues that most Americans have today. And it was actually Black people who started the Republican Party, by the way. So Trump taps into Americans' concerns over religious liberty. Enter Donald Trump, an unlikely champion of the Christian right. Trump's appeals to make America great again and his disdain for the Republican Party establishment energized many conservative white Christians and white working class Americans more generally who felt that they were living in a country that they no longer recognized. Trump gave a voice to conservative Christians' concerns that their religious liberty was under siege. He delivered on important policies long sought by the Christian right, including the appointment of U.S. Supreme Court justices opposed to abortion, leading to the High Court's reversal of Roe last summer. Finding policy success within the Trump administration, many socially conservative Christians have become emboldened, seeking a larger role within the Republican Party at all levels of government. They have proposed policies that stem from distinctive theological worldview, which envisions a larger role for religion in the public square. These conservative Christians aspire to make all abortions illegal, ban books that discuss gender identity or systemic racism in public schools and libraries, curtail immigration dramatically, and allow business owners to forego offering services to LGBTQ plus Americans in the name of religious liberty. In essence, these activists, who some critics refer to as Christian nationalists, wish to have their religious values privileged over others in public policy. They believe that America was founded as and should remain as a Christian nation. Well, it was. maybe not one nation under Christianity. So, does this mean that the future of Christianity in American politics will result in a strong rightward shift? Not necessarily. Christian nationalism is an ideology that is shared only by a minority of Americans. When my organization, PRRI, asked Americans this past fall whether God intended America to be a new promised land where European Christians could create a society that could be an example to the rest of the world, just 31% agreed. Moreover, the fastest growing religious category in the United States is not Christianity. 1 in 4 Americans identifies as religiously unaffiliated, according to PRRI's most recent American Values Atlas. By contrast, white evangelical Protestants, the Christians' rights key target constituency, comprise only 15% of the population. When combined with mainstream white Protestants and white Catholics, white Christians make up less than half, or 45% of the U.S. population. In 1990, 72% of Americans were white and Christian. Today, 1 in 4 Americans are Christians of color who continue to support Democrats at much higher rates than white Christians. Looking into the political future, Americans ages 18 to 29 are even less likely to identify as white Christians, just 29%. Younger Americans are both less religious, 34% identify as religiously unaffiliated, and more religiously diverse. The future, then, for Christianity and American politics is not necessarily one that involves the implementation of a specific conservative theological worldview into most of our public policies. However, in the short term, these policies may very likely materialize in states with legislatures controlled by strong Republican majorities. I think the more likely scenario is that conservative Christians will continue to be part of the larger religious landscape that accepts a variety of religious voices into the policy process. This tolerance is rooted in a tenet central to American democracy. Enshrined in rights guaranteed by the First Amendment, the founders ensured religious freedom for all individuals and faiths. Now, in contrast, Timothy Head here writes Christianity helped build America, and can it rebuild it too? So he's the executive director of Faith and Freedom Coalition, and he gets asked, so a lot of the questions he gets asked is about Christianity in American politics. So who will be a part of it? Which party is its real home? Where is it going? Is its influence growing or not? If so, how? The short answer is its future looks bright. The longer and more complete answer requires that we revisit the past of Christianity in America to understand where it stands today and where it's going. America was, as its founding, an overwhelmingly Christian nation. The faith of the people supported and informed what would eventually become one of the most radical political undertakings in history, the Great American Experiment in Liberty. Our nation also remains far more Christian than is popular to believe. Despite statistical declines overall, roughly 2/3 of the country is Christian. Christians represent more than 80% of the Republican voters base and almost 2/3 of the Democrat or likely Democrat voter base. The Christian faith also provides indispensable moral and philosophical support for our notions of law, of justice, of liberty, and of the human person itself. How this looks in discrete political terms has grown more complicated since the nation's founding. This is due in part to secularization and ongoing shifts in the prevailing American political philosophies. So, who are Christian voters? When people talk about Christian voters nowadays, they don't just mean Americans who vote, they often mean specifically conservative Christians. And there's an important reason they do. Conservative Christians have been working together for more than 50 years to defend the sanctity of human life and the dignity of the person, whether that manifests as the defense of liberty, justice, or safety. Conservative Christians have created a powerful political alliance. They are committed to the founders' original vision of man blessed with reason by his creator, endowed with quote unquote unalienable rights, and entitled to rule by a just government for the sake of his flourishing. These Christians are conservative because conservatism is the most effective means of preserving this reality of man made in God's image. That's true now, and it was true decades ago when the religious right first became politically ascendant. They knew they needed to defend what they cherished most, so they did. The emergence of the Christian voting bloc. The conservative Christian voting bloc emerged as a direct response to real political threats. The 1954 Johnson Amendment, one of the first real motivators for evangelical Christians' political rise, barred churches from endorsing political candidates. 8 years later, prayer was removed from schools following the Supreme Court's decision in Engel versus Vital. The political watershed, however, was the now infamous Roe v. Wade decision in 1973. American evangelicals rallied to protect unborn life and built an extensive political infrastructure to that end. Just 7 years later, former President Ronald Reagan's victory proved they were a political faction to be reckoned with. The Christian vote is a critically influential voting bloc in contemporary American politics, and it's growing, not diminishing. Its strength is expanding, and increasingly, the Christian vote is conservative. This voter bloc is also becoming more racially diverse as it grows. Religious Latino voters have flocked to conservative candidates in recent years, despite historically voting for Democrats. Why? Because they cherish their families, their faith, and their hard won liberties. They want to be safe, they want to practice their faith freely, they want their children to receive a good education and to make good lives for themselves. A powerful force for good in America's future. To vote as an American Christian is more often than not to cast your vote for a conservative. And this isn't because of racial identity. It's not because of petty politics or economic grievance. It's because of our shared faith. It's because of our common knowledge of the sanctity of life, the dignity of work, the blessings and responsibilities of liberty, and of the God given rights of man. The Christian vote is as closely entwined with the future of America as it has been with the past and is with the present. Thank God it is too. Christianity offers a compelling, abiding vision of hope, redemption, and justice. It comforts those who mourn, lifts the weak and the vulnerable, and discourages private and public vice. Christianity isn't just a powerful force in politics, it's a powerful force for good. And that is true whether or not you personally profess Christian faith. The founders knew this, and we would do well to remember it. I had this other article, but I know I've been going kind of long. I can't do that one because I'm not subscribing to the New York Times. Okay, really quickly. This is the Washington Times. Now, I don't necessarily like the Washington Times, but I want to take a look at this. The fatal fall of religion in America will affect everything. As our society moves away from faith, there's more loneliness and lack of community. This is just an opinion piece by Don Fetter. So, a just published survey of the decline of religion in America should set off alarm bells in our heads. The growth of secularism is one more cause for anxiety about the future of our republic. The study by the prestigious American Enterprise Institute, quote, Generation Z and the Future of Faith in America, this is released on March 24th, shows a steady erosion of religious affiliation and the corresponding rise of atheism and agnosticism. Generation Z, so born from 1997 to 2012, is the least religious in our history, with 34% reporting that they aren't affiliated with the church, synagogue, or another religious body. That's 9 points higher than for Generation X and 5 points higher than millennials. Alexis de Tocqueville, that astute observer of early 19th century America, said he found the genius of our young republic in the moral voice of its churches. Today, that voice is increasingly silenced. Not only is religious affiliation declining, but atheism and agnosticism is growing. 18% for Gen Z, the highest in our history, compared to 4% for the silent generation, which apparently did not find Nietzsche in the foxholes. Many who profess belief don't walk the walk, but non-belief does not inspire great acts of charity, building hospitals, or endowing educational institutions. Harvard may be militantly anti-religion today, but it started as a seminary to train Puritan clergy. The AIE report observes that of those who left the religion of their childhood, an increasing share of the unaffiliated, most can't point to a single incident that caused them to lose faith. Still, it's hard not to see a connection between the growth of secularism and a culture dedicated to debunking traditional religion. In a 2021 Gallup survey, only 37% said they had a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in organized religion. That's a dramatic fall from 2001 when 60% said they had a lot of confidence in religious institutions. Such trends do not happen in a vacuum. Undoubtedly, clerical sexual abuse had an impact, but minimal compared to the culture's relentless attacks on religion and people of faith. Where are era's great religious movies like The Song of Bernadette and The Ten Commandments? Unless it's religion of the left, renewable energy cultism, God made me transgendered, and perpetual penance for the sin of being born white and male, Hollywood portrays the religious and superstitious bumpkins or hate-filled fanatics. And that's true. And I made a post about this on Twitter that, people say that Christians are so hateful. And I'm saying born again Christians, that they're so hateful. And I thought, how could, a Christian is the most loving person. They care more about people than anybody else in the world because they will still try to share the gospel with you, show you how to be a born again Christian. They want you to do that. They're trying to prevent you from spending eternity in hell. And you say that that's hateful? That's not hateful. But hateful would be that they would say, well, I'm saved. I'm going to heaven. I don't care about anybody else. So I'm done. I'm just going to live my life. I'm not going to try and talk to people. You know, that would be hateful to say, yeah, I know they're going to hell, but I don't really care because I'm okay. I'm not. That would be hateful. Um, the last thing that I pulled up, which is from the Daily Wire, and I know that this doesn't really have anything to do with well, it does technically, the decline of Christianity. First of all, I'm not Southern Baptist. I'm Independent Fundamental Baptist. A lot of people have a problem with IFB churches. Yes, there's probably issues in every denomination, but the reason I'm Baptist is because they believe their beliefs are more in line with the King James Bible than any other denomination. That's why I'm Baptist. I'm not Christian because I'm Baptist. I'm Christian because I'm saved, but I go to a Baptist church. Anyway, I don't like the Southern Baptist movement. I'm not saying that there aren't people in Southern Baptist churches that aren't born again. I think there are people that are born again that are Catholic or claim to be Catholic, Southern Baptist. I think you can be born again if you're part of the Mormon church. That doesn't mean you can't. I just think at some point you would come to the realization that that faith does not line up with what being born again is, and that you would move away from it and find a church that aligns with what you know to be right as a born again believer. But some people never do. But that's between them and God, not me. I can just point out that their religion is wrong. So Southern Baptists, they're a part of like a hierarchy. They have people that they have to answer to. It's the Southern Baptist Convention. They have to answer to those people higher up. Independent Fundamental Baptists don't do that. They're independent churches. They run off of their members, do tithing and offerings. The tithes and offerings pay the pastor and his wife and provide for their living, because that is their job as being a pastor. They don't make money elsewhere. They're dedicated to being the pastor, and then he has his wife that will dedicate her life to helping. So that's why, I like the independent movement, because we don't answer to anybody but God. So the Southern Baptist booted the Saddleback Church because of a female pastor. Now, I'm very traditional, and I believe the Bible when it explicitly states in there that women are not to be leaders of the church. I know women can teach Sunday school. Women can counsel other women. It's probably better if a woman counsels another woman. That's why a pastor that's why a pastor should be married, so that she can counsel to the women of the church instead of them having to go to a male, especially if it's something that would be embarrassing for a woman to talk about with a man. So, I don't believe that women should be leaders of the church. Now, California megachurch Saddleback Church. Well, there's your problem. It's a megachurch. Founded by prominent Christian leader and best-selling author Rick Warren, was disfellowshipped from the Southern Baptist Convention on Tuesday over having a female pastor. Now, again, while I don't agree with the Southern Baptist Convention, there are things that the Southern Baptists believe that are correct, and this would be one of them. So officials on the executive committee voted out one of the largest churches in the United States less than a year after Warren delivered his final sermon as Saddleback senior pastor and ushered in lead pastor Andy Wood and his wife Stacy, who serves as a teaching pastor. Due to the church continuing to have a female functioning in the office of pastor, SBC Executive Committee Chairman Jared Wellman told the Daily Wire in a statement that the convention ousted the 43-year-old megachurch as it is not in friendly cooperation with the denomination. Wood told the Associated Press last year that the Bible, quote, teaches that men and women were given spiritual gifts by God. The church should be a place where both men and women can exercise those spiritual gifts. My wife has the spiritual gift of teaching, and she is really good. People often tell me that she's better than me when it comes to preaching, and I'm really glad to hear that. So this is the Andy Wood of the Saddleback Church saying that. The move from the convention also comes after Warren ordained 3 women as pastors in May 2021, sparking the initial discussion to remove the church from the SBC, arguing it defied biblical principles and Article 6 in the Baptist Faith and Message. Quote, while both men and women are gifted for service in the church, the office of the pastor is limited to men as qualified by Scripture, the article reads. Warren responded to Saddleback's disfellowship in a tweet on Tuesday, thanking his supporters. Says, friends worldwide, I'm so touched by your love. We'll respond to SBC in our time and way through direct channels. And then he quotes Luke 23:43. Says that their newsletters reached out to 600,000 church leaders, daily Hope radio broadcasts, 1 million PDC alumni, pastors, and then 11 million social media followers. Good for you. At an SBC convention in June 2022, Warren responded to officials calling to sever the relationship with Saddleback. Quote, are we going to keep bickering over secondary issues, or are we going to keep the main thing the main thing? Warren also reportedly said at the same meeting that he believes there's a difference between the office of pastor and the gift of pastor. Traditional Christians believe the Bible makes it clear from a complementarian viewpoint that women have a place in ministry under male leaders' authority, arguing that primary leadership roles for females are unhealthy, counter to biblical standards, and place the congregation on a slippery slope away from fundamental scripture teachings and on a path toward more liberalism. You know, in the old days, in the Old Testament, is that in the Old Testament or the New Testament? Don't quote me. I know that when they attended church, synagogue, because these would be Jewish people, the men and women didn't sit together. So if you were married, you didn't sit with your wife. That should tell you something. You didn't sit together. Women were separated from the men when they did that. Anyway, I know we don't do that now. Of course, we don't do that now. You know, families sit together. You know, whole families, husbands, wives, their kids. I understand that. I'm just making a point. Quote, they are on that path. Anybody can see this by following their social media pages, a source who requested anonymity told the Daily Wire. The executive committee also ousted 5 other churches from the convention, 4 of which have a woman serving as a lead or senior pastor. I feel so sorry for those church members. Get out. Those churches include New Faith Mission Ministry in Griffin, Georgia, St. Timothy's Christian Baptist in Baltimore, Maryland, Calvary Baptist Church in Jackson, Mississippi, and Fern Creek Baptist Church in Louisville, Kentucky. SBC officials also disfellowshipped Freedom Church in Vero Beach, Florida, over a sex abuse-related issue, which the Tennessean reported executive committee chairman Wellman said the church exhibited, quote, a lack of intent to cooperate in resolving concerns regarding a sexual abuse allegation. These churches have been valued cooperating churches for many years, and this decision was not made lightly. However, we remain committed to upholding the theological convictions of the SBC and maintaining unity among its cooperating churches. Pastor Richard Demsick of Freedom Church said in an interview with the Tennessean, quote, we are deeply saddened by the false allegations which are slanderous. There are no sexual abuse allegations. There have been false reports based on gossip. I don't know anything about it, so I won't comment. The Southern Baptist Convention leader said last year the nation's largest Protestant denomination, which has almost 14 million members and more than 47,000 churches in all 50 states, was under investigation by the Justice Department for sexual abuse allegations. An outside consultant reported that women and children were abused by male pastors, church employees, and officials from 2000 to the present, the New York Times reported. Quote, for almost 2 decades, survivors of abuse and other concerned Southern Baptists have been contacting the Southern Baptist Convention to report child molesters and other abusers who were in the pulpit or employed as church staff, end quote. Victims said they made several attempts via phone, mail, and email, showed up at meetings, and held rallies, only to be met time and time again with resistance, stonewalling, and even outright hostility. SBC officials and the convention would, quote, fully and completely cooperate with the investigation, and the church continues to grieve and lament past mistakes. All 6 churches can appeal the decision made by SBC officials at the convention's next annual meeting, which is set to take place in New Orleans in June. So there you go. Christianity definitely failing in American culture right now. People with their faith, they're falling away. People have less hope than they did. But this is why it matters to the culture and even to the political scene is it does give people hope. It gives us something to fight for, truth and right, morals. This is why people hate us because we do that and because they want to keep what they're doing. It would be sinful. The transgender movement, homosexuality, all of that. It's dark, it's sinful. That's why they don't like us because it sheds a light on it, and evil likes darkness, not light. So I think it's a huge problem that we're facing, but I think that, um, or I hope that more people will start standing up. And, I say, like, if I were ever faced with that decision, if I were in a position where the government decided to start how they do in the Middle East, killing Christians, I would like to sit here as I'm safe and able to say that I'm a Christian, say that, if I was told, I had to denounce being a Christian or die, I hope that I would say, no, I won't denounce that. You can kill me. That's fine. But it's so easy to put yourself in that situation when you're not actually in it. Um, I think the more I grow in my faith, and that's the whole point of going to church, going to Sunday school. It's to learn. It's to, you know, grow as a Christian. And it helps your relationship be stronger. So as you do that, you would hope that if that ever happened, by that time, you were so strong in your faith that it wouldn't cross your mind to ever deny it. But, you can't say 100% because you can't say never. You should never say never. You'll eat crow one day. I've done it. I've said never. And, you know, I had to eat crow for sure. So, and that's more than once. And I think that happens to a lot of people. So I will never say never. But I hope that I would never have to be faced with that in the first place. I hope we don't come to that in our country. But I know reading through the end time prophecies and in Revelation, um, not that I noticed this myself, but it had been pointed out many times that you can clearly see, you know, the depiction of Russia and the Middle East, and I believe China even, but the United States is not depicted anywhere. America's gone. And it's I don't know why. Nobody knows why. We can only make educated guesses as have we fallen as a nation? Are we siding with these other countries against Israel? What is it? Are we siding with Israel? Doubtful, because it said all nations will come against them. So I don't know where we are at that point. But I do know that, we're heading there. And I think we've already fallen off the edge of the cliff because we have been regressing exponentially over the last definitely 3 years. It's gotten so bad. And so I thought maybe this would be a good time to talk about it, you know, and encourage more people to go to church, read your Bible, and, if you're not saved, to get saved. Because I've always said this, if I'm wrong, then I've lost nothing by believing what I believe. I know I'm not wrong, but if I was, then I've lost nothing. But if you're wrong and God is real and hell is real and you do have to be saved to go to heaven, then you lose everything when you die. You know, living a Christian life is not a bad life. People think that being a Christian, limits you being able to even have an enjoyable, fulfilled life. And it truly doesn't. Yeah, there's things that you are not supposed to do as a Christian, but those things are not what fulfill you in life. In fact, you'll look around at people that, especially millennials and Gen Zers, they are doomers. But the millennials that, have become very promiscuous and they sleep around and they go party and all they do is drink and do that. They are not living fulfilled lives. They are actually truly miserable people deep down. They can put on a mask that they're happy, but deep down they're not. This is why feminists especially are the most miserable people to be around because they're not living a fulfilled life due to the role that they were set to have as a woman put forth by God in the Bible. That's just my thoughts. Anyway, hope you have a good day. Have a good rest of your week. And I'm glad to be back doing this. I really enjoy it. So you can go check me out on YouTube. I bet this gets taken down. But it is going to be up on Rumble. I'll link all the articles in the description if you want to read them and the graphs. And thank you for joining in, and have a good rest of your day.